Happening, folks. This is going to be a really simple video. I felt compelled to make it after seeing a bigger YouTuber do something I thought was really stupid. Next week, on March 26th, Rhys Frake Waterfield is releasing a sequel to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Part of Rhys's ramp-up for this launch has involved complimenting certain influencers who may have reviewed this movie negatively last year. And he's doing it just before the sequel comes out. Obviously, he's doing this in hopes of extracting even more money from a new group of horror fans. And although I won't specify who was daft enough to fall for this childish trick, I will say it has started working already. So very quickly, for anybody unaware, Winnie the Pooh went public domain at the start of 2022. Rhys Waterfield dove on the opportunity immediately in order to capitalize on the novelty of converting a cultural icon into a horror figure. And in capable hands, this could have been a great idea. But as I'm about to demonstrate, these hands are not capable, they are just greedy. This is a bare-bones recap of what Rhys Waterfield gave us in exchange for the $5 million he earned leveraging our natural curiosity. The movie opens with a Guillermo del Toro style animated intro that actually looks kind of interesting because it sort of resembles the original artwork of E.H. Shepard. But the novelty wears off a few seconds later when we're introduced to Christopher Robin, played by Nikolai Leon, who I'm not familiar with. And the moment he opens his mouth, you'll be tempted not only to call it quits on the movie, but possibly on all movies if this is the direction independent horror filmmaking might be heading. Christopher has dragged his wife into the middle of nowhere to prove the half-man, half-animal friends he had as a child were real. And if the actor's speech impediment doesn't completely take you out of the story, the painful dialogue and absolute butchering of the art of acting by both of them just might. We listen on as Christopher Robin, the beloved, intelligent, friendly, and articulate young fella from many of our childhoods, begs his soon-to-be wife to believe his stories about the crossbreed abominations he grew up with and subsequently abandoned. Just in case that term didn't register with you right away, in my humble opinion, if you wanted to turn Winnie the Pooh into a horror icon, the best route would have been the direct one. Have him wake up one morning with a strange new overpowering urge to eat flesh, because he's a bear. Any half-decent writer would know fighting against that primal, instinctive urge and eventually losing that fight is a story that would basically write itself. But they had no interest in wasting time coming up with a good story because in movie-making terms, time is money. So this movie implies Winnie and Piglet and the rest of the gang are half-human, half-animal hybrid abominations. And it doesn't mention how they came to be this way, but you can probably figure that out yourself. Christopher Robin's loving wife doesn't believe him and thinks he's making everything up. As your friend and humble narrator, I'd recommend against trying to reconcile a loving wife and not believing her husband's life story being in the same sentence. Trust me, you're just going to end up with a sore head. Eventually, they arrive at their version of 100 Acre Wood, which is a place they describe as a desolate wasteland void of nourishment. Yet, when you look at it, it's a lush, thriving forest, and that means the narration isn't even matching the scenery. His wife's terrified by the vibe of the place and she begs Christopher Robin to take them home, but he refuses. He assures her everything will be fine because these crossbreed abominations are his friends. And then a man wearing a pig mask that's somehow less intimidating looking than the actual Piglet cartoon kills his wife with a chain while Christopher Robin stands 8 feet away with his hand extended, screaming at the Piglet stand-in, begging it to stop, which of course it does not. Then a man in a bear mask joins the man in the pig mask and Christopher Robin is dragged away. Then we meet the movie's first brunette. And you can take my word, it's easier designating the cast members this way. She's on a therapist's couch describing how much her debilitating fear of somebody is interfering with her ability to live a normal life. So her therapist breaks scientific ground by advising her to go somewhere for the weekend. So she tosses aside the unbearable burden of her clinical, crippling social anxieties like you would a jacket at the end of your workday, and she heads out to meet the girlies. Along the way, she stops into a gas station where you can watch the blatant overlap in their $5 fog effect as she gets out of the car. And inside the station in England, she meets a local mechanic who speaks with a generic southern accent from America. Probably because Reese Waterfield saw that happen in another movie. The girls arrive at the house they're renting for the weekend. There's this brunette, the first brunette with the fair-weather social anxieties, the one with the boobs, and the nerdy brunette. And as far as characters go, nothing differentiates these girls from each other, so I'm not going to clutter this plot summary with names you're never going to remember. Meanwhile, there's an attractive girl with lovely red hair somewhere nearby, and she's lost trying to find the brunettes. So the man in the bear mask rips her shirt and bra completely off and kills her. Then we find out the first brunette seeing the therapist because some overly keen fella stalked her in the past. And if you're thinking that seems a mighty serious subject to toss into the middle of a Winnie the Pooh ripoff, you're absolutely right. They draw her story out for so long it loses any of the tension normally inherent to this sort of recollection. And if you were thinking the stalker might have been wearing some kind of mask to tie him into the main story, he's not. It's just some guy who never appears in the story ever again. Back with Bear Mask, our lovely redhead's been eaten, and the remains are a combination of hilarious white plastic bits and a blonde wig. And a few feet over to the left, Christopher Robin's tied up. He repeats all the same lines he said earlier when he was begging and pleading and crying and sniveling. And every time he's on screen, you really just want the scene to end. Badly, for him, preferably, because his voice is insufferable. Bear Mask has a wee tantrum, and then he gives Christopher Robin 40 lashes with what I think might be his dead wife's hair. Her hair wasn't that long, but it was dark, and if it's not hers, that means Bear Mask had it laying around for just such an occasion. But what really throws you in this scene is the fact the full-grown man who did literally nothing to stop his wife's brutal murder is now wincing in pain in response to being hit with a ponytail. Then the one with the boobs does what she was hired for in the hot tub, and traditionally in an actual slasher film you'd probably see said boobs, but this film chooses not to show that sort of thing. I suspect it's probably the greed seeping through. They didn't want to pay the young girl to get them out any more than they wanted to pay a decent writer for a story or a VFX team to create believable fog. And then, surprisingly, Bear Mask and Pig Mask drag her out of the hot tub and drive over her head with a car they have access to and are able to operate. And all the ruckus grabs the attention of the first brunette and nerdy brunette. And when they see the CGI blood thing on top of their friend's head in the driveway, the cheapness of the effect sends them running inside screaming, even though the front door is wide open and whoever did this is probably inside. With the remaining brunettes all standing in the same place in front of these windows with "Get Out" written across them, the first brunette, or the third brunette, concludes the person who killed the one with the boobs probably wrote this. And it's very difficult to argue with that logic. The person that killed their friend is probably the same one who wrote "Get Out" across the window in blood. And then the girls band together and go all lions and tigers and bear masks for 10 minutes, until the first brunette makes it all about herself by suggesting her stalker is doing all this. And in the very next scene, they all seem to think they're being chased by something inhuman, instead of a guy in a cheap mask, or even the stalker they just claimed it to be in the previous scene. So they all split up to create more scenes in the movie, and brunettes 2 and 3 wind up in the indoor pool room, where Pig Mask surprises them with a sledgehammer. And when brunette 3 ends up in the pool, Pig Mask decides it makes the most sense to climb in and walk slowly after her the entire length of the long, narrow pool. And while this makes no logical sense, it really does stretch out the overall runtime. Yes, it does remove all the tension from the scene, but it's an essential tactic when you're filming a movie with no story. And right when I thought these brain-dead idiots had squeezed every last drop of green blood from this movie stone, they play this already slow scene in slow motion. It's genius. After the Austin Powers scene taking itself seriously eventually plays out, Nerdy Brunette and the first brunette elude the two masked weirdos whilst brandishing a prop handgun, the likes of which I have never seen before. We're also treated to random intermittent shots of Bear Mask smearing KY jelly around his mouth as if he's eating something. Maybe it's meant to be honey, but it's crystal clear. So the remaining three brunettes gather together again, which means my brunette math has been way off. Nerdy and the first brunette untie brunette 2, and the first brunette demonstrates her obvious leadership skills with this bold, conclusive statement.
We can't stay here, Alice.
After having to actually consider the statement for a moment, the other two eventually agree, and we transition into phase 27 of the brunettes trying to escape the guys in the masks. Only this time, they bump into Christopher Robin, whom I had totally forgotten about until right this second. After the three brunettes who've managed to survive this ordeal themselves rescue him from bondage, he shouts orders at them as if he isn't the same person they just rescued who couldn't wrestle a guy in a bear mask to save his own wife's life. Then the girls find another girl who might be that redhead, but it's impossible to tell. And she's also giving the brunettes information about who Bear and Pig Mask are, and the redhead wouldn't have known any of that, so I'm not sure who she is. And they allow the poor girl to keep talking without offering to untie her. I'd have been all like, could we maybe do the getting to know you chit-chat stuff after you get me showered or to the hospital, you dizzy assholes? So the new girl takes the Alec Baldwin gun and goes after Pig Mask with it, and she forgets which side her limp is on, but it doesn't really matter as she can't do it very well on either side. Then she discharges the gun to make sure the free gun muzzle flash effect pack they downloaded is put to use. And then during the tense Western-style showdown with Pigface, the girl can't get the gun to work. Probably because the angle has changed and the VFX artist wasn't sure how to apply the effect anymore with his little mouse. So Bear Mask sneaks up on her while the brunettes watch on from safety like they're watching a community play. That is until Bear Mask starts chasing Nerdy and the first brunette again. And third or second brunette suddenly born again hard. Oorah, I say. She beats up Pig Mask and talks a bunch of trash like she's 1990s Linda Hamilton. And maybe if she'd acted half as hard at the start of the story.
Now, when I refer to it as story, it's because I'm not sure what else to call it on such short notice, so please, folks, don't get the wrong idea.
Anyways, Bear Mask does her in, even though he was in the process of chasing Nerdy and the first brunette half a mile away 2 seconds ago. So more chasing ensues and the girls run into the American hillbillies in England. And when Bear Mask shows up, the hillbillies don't think the guy in the mask is human either. During this scene, I'm guessing Bear Mask is pretty confused himself as each of the hillbillies' accents shift from English to American to Australian to Martian and back again at totally random points in each of their sentences. And it is kind of entertaining, if I'm honest. Then they try beating Bear Mask up, but he has superhuman strength, even though Brunette 2 or 3 just kicked the shit out of Pig Mask in the last scene. Then Bear Mask slaps one of the hillbillies' faces off. Then Bear Mask slaps one of the hillbillies' faces off, and it all really spirals out of control from here. There's a car chase and a car crash, and Bear Mask gets head from Nerdy.
No, not like that, you pervs.
And at the very last second, Christopher Robin crushes the fuck out of Bear Mask with a car. But if you thought that was enough to extinguish the power of a latex bear mask, you'd be stupid. So, for the third time in this movie, Bear Mask stands over a squealing, sobbing, pathetic bitch of a Christopher Robin who gurns from his knees in the mud. And then Bear Mask finishes the first brunette off, which I am sure they thought was going to be shocking. But if you're listening, Reese Waterfield, the shocking elements of this project have absolutely nothing to do with the movie itself.
And that, folks, leaves us with 37 loose ends and 11 unanswerable questions about a movie that follows no recognizable structure or pattern that I have ever come across in my long and very enjoyable movie-watching career. $100,000 investment for a $5 million return. There's no plot, there's no acting, there's no writing, there's no visual effects, there's no sound effects, there is no heart, and there's definitely no soul. If we keep paying these people to do this, they will just keep doing it. Part 2 comes out next week. As always, I would never tell any of you what to do. I would just like you to bear in mind everything we've just talked about if you are considering giving this guy your money again. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that video you just watched, although I'm sure you know who I am, right? You should subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost anything, it's easy to do, and it makes creative people like myself who thrive on compliments feel all warm and fuzzy. And if you like that last video, click on this next video because it's just as amazing. Click on it.